Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to the 100th episode of the internet's favorite show about plastic surgery, health, and beauty. This is Nip Talk. We've actually got a really good topic for this monumental episode. Trump's ear injury. The internet is awash with questions, and we got some answers. Then, Matt Gatez Botox problems. What's going on with him? We're going to talk about it. And then finally, heat exhaustion and heat stroke. What you need to know to avoid those dangerous diseases. It's all coming up right now.
Live from Lincoln Center in the heart of the Dallas Metroplex, this is Nip Talk, an honest and uncensored show about plastic surgery, health, beauty, and lifestyle, with your host, plastic surgeon Dr. Bruce Hermann, and your co-host, entrepreneur and social media influencer Sarah Bennett. Now it's time to discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of the topics everyone is talking about. It's time for Nip Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. Please hit that like and subscribe button. I'm your host, plastic surgeon Dr. Bruce Hermann. With me, as always, is Sarah.
Hi.
Sarah. In the box, we got Travis. How are you, man?
Hey, I'm good. How about yourself?
100th episode. I
Yes,
actually
indeed.
had forgotten until I came in. Everybody was saying it was the 100th
Yeah,
episode.
it's all decorated.
It's hard to
and
believe,
stuff.
100 episodes. Man,
100.
that's crazy. Well, I want to thank both you guys, Sarah and Travis. I really do appreciate you guys, and I love doing the show. And we haven't hit like the biggest time yet, but we're getting closer, and
We're having fun doing it.
we
I
have a
was
lot of
thinking
fun.
the same thing.
We have a lot of fun. We put out some good information. There are a lot of people out there that really do like the topics we put out. But I appreciate both you guys, truly.
Well, thank you.
I
It's
enjoy
been
You guys
fun.
are the best. Like, I really look forward to this every Friday.
Yeah, this hands down is my favorite show that I produce.
Is it?
Hands down.
Oh, that's cool, man. I
Yes.
appreciate it.
Yes.
Is this your favorite podcast that you do, Sarah?
It's the only one.
You could have just said it was your favorite.
Right.
It's my favorite. Jealous, you can edit that out.
So, we're going to talk about it in a segment, but man, what crazy weekend with the Trump thing, right? And obviously this show's not like at all a political show, but wasn't that, my mind was blown. That was crazy stuff.
Yeah, it was wild.
Yeah.
I was like
That
on my
weird.
computer and I was doing something and my wife popped in. She's like, I'm going to the store, and she goes, oh, by the way, there was like some gunshots at a Trump rally. And I was like, oh, really? And I was like, it's probably some rednecks shooting off firecrackers, or somebody out in the parking lot, like gun went off or something. And I was like, well, I'm gonna jump on X and just look, and then like I saw the video. I was like, holy crap! Like that's like the real deal, man.
Yeah.
Like,
The shooter guy, he was wearing a shirt made by a YouTuber called Demolition Ranch.
I heard that. It's
And
like-
I know him. I used to make YouTube videos with him.
Oh, you're kidding?
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
The
he has
Demolition Ranch guy?
yeah, he has so many followers, and he's like the sweetest person, and
Yeah.
so is his family, and he was like mortified.
That he had the shirt on.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Jeez.
And he has his show, his YouTube channel. He has like 3, but it's like one of them that kid was wearing, or he
Oh, that's
looked like a
crazy.
kid.
I heard he had some shirt on.
It's called Demolition Ranch. It's
Yeah.
a show about Pow Pows.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
I probably have seen it. 'Cause
but it doesn't promote any type of
Right.
like human violence.
Of
It's more
course.
like
Yeah, absolutely.
just making things go boom.
I probably have seen it. Trey and I both talked about. Trey and I both like to shoot ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, not shoot ourselves, but like we both we both like to shoot.
Oh gosh.
That was a weird way to put it.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure.
One of these days, Trey, we'll have to go out to the range and we'll take some video.
Absolutely. Nah, I love going to the range.
Yeah, we'll have to do that.
I think I was like taking a nap that Saturday, and then I woke up and I
It's
saw
all
like
over Instagram.
yeah, it was all over, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is like AI, like it's probably fake. I saw like
Yes.
the blood, and I was like, oh, this is just AI. And then more people started reporting it. I was like, uh-oh, this is real.
Yeah.
It kind of made me feel like I was just like, it kind of made me like sympathize for him.
Who,
and
for
then,
Trump?
Yeah, and
Oh, I
then I
think
was like,
everybody
wait,
did.
is that what we're supposed to be doing? And then I immediately just turned my phone off.
You're like, how should I feel? Well, listen,
I was like, I can't look at this anymore.
obviously this show is not political at all, but I will say, and I'm very like neutral about Trump, but that one, the picture he had where like
Yeah, no,
the flag was
that's
behind him,
super
and he was
America.
like blood was on him. I was like, dang, that's a Pulitzer Prize winning photo, regardless
Yeah.
of how you feel about the politics. Like, that picture was pretty iconic.
No, it's going to be in history books for
Yeah,
sure.
it will be. So, well, all right, let's roll into our first segment. And I actually got asked by the media to do a couple interviews on this. Nothing huge, mostly radio stuff. And it's about Trump's ear injury. Because there are a lot of questions, especially out there on social media, that are being bounced around. And some of these I can actually weigh in on very intelligently, because as a plastic surgeon who has continued to do trauma surgery into my, kind of private practice years, because a lot of people just do trauma when they're in training and they go into private practice and they drop it. But I've continued to do trauma, and how that weighs in with plastics is when people get injuries that are too complex for your basic surgeon to deal, they call me.
Yeah.
And that includes ears, and I've done lots of ear injuries. I was trying to think if I've ever done a gunshot to the ear. I know I've done like machete and knife injuries to the ear, lots of car wrecks. I may or may not have done a gunshot. I just can't remember. I mean, when you do it, it just all runs together, and you don't really even, I hardly ever ask anymore, like, hey, what happened to you? Because it's just like, there's a problem, let me fix it. But
right.
But I can talk about ear injuries and, know a little bit about ballistics. In my whole life, I don't do it that much anymore, but I used to actually shoot a lot, because I just kind of grew up doing that. So, so I want to jump into it. And like I said, was really shocked to hear about this thing. And of course, all these questions come up. And one of the first questions that I saw bouncing around on social media, which is kind of weird to me, but I mean, people ask weird questions, I guess, was Trump hit by a bullet, or was he hit by broken glass? And at first I was like, why are people asking that? But I mean, I guess it's important to know, because it does kind of weigh into like how serious an injury could be. If you get hit by a broken glass, I mean, obviously that could be very dangerous, but there's a lot of difference between glass and a bullet, because bullet, as we'll talk about in one of the later questions, have a lot more kinetic energy.
Yeah.
And so if it was a bullet over glass, you have to be more worried about more severe injury. So I went through and looked at a lot of videos, slow motion as I could, and in my opinion, what do you guys think? Before I throw my opinion out, what do you think? Was it a bullet or glass?
I think it was a bullet, but that's only because I feel like if it was glass, there would have been more damage to his face or something. Like, he would have more little spots of
Reasonable,
glass.
Travis?
Yeah, I honestly didn't see glass. Like, I saw that narrative being pushed or whatever, but I honestly didn't see a glass shatter.
So I think it was a bullet. I mean, obviously, no one can be. Well, I guess someone could be 100%, but as for someone who cannot examine him and was not at the scene, I mean, I'm 99% sure this was a bullet.
Sure.
And the reason I say that is when a bullet hits like glass or something and you get shrapnel, I mean, obviously it's moving at a high rate of speed, but it's not moving anywhere close to the rate of speed that a bullet is. And you can see like shrapnel and especially glass in videos, especially if there's a lot of angles. And so I went through all the videos, and I never saw any type of like shrapnel or glass flying. Also too, when you look at the pic, and throw up that next picture, Travis. So this is the closest picture I could get of his ear without it being covered. So I looked at this really closely. To me, it looks like a bullet injury, like a very, very close graze type injury. I put the two arrows in the locations where I think the bullet hit, which would be the helical rim of the ear. That part sticks out further. And it looks like the bullet just grazed that right side. And then the arrows are showing the path of the bullet. And when you look at that, it's a very, very straight shot across, which would be what you would expect with a bullet that hit, the ear in the front and then the lobe on the back. And so, looking at the video and not seeing any, glass broken or any broken teleprompters for that reason, because you can scroll through the video long enough to see, okay, is there anything hit around the stage? Didn't see that, didn't see glass. Look at the injury. Looks pretty indicative of a bullet to me.
I mean, it was outside, so I'm sure there wasn't that much glass around.
Yeah, well, somebody was saying it may have been a teleprompter. Oh. Because they have those glass teleprompters. On one side you see through it, but on the other side it has words on it. And so somebody's saying, "Oh, is a teleprompter breaking?" Nah, I don't think so. I'm pretty certain that was a bullet.
Did you see the pictures of if he would have turned his head?
Oh, it's so funny you mentioned that.
Oh.
We're gonna look at this. So I think that we could probably put that to rest. That looks like a bullet injury to me. Of course, didn't examine him, wasn't there, but with my knowledge and looking at the video, I think that that's probably the answer. So the next question that people were saying is, okay, if this was a bullet, why didn't Trump's whole ear get blown off? I can give you a little bit of data on that. It's a good question to ask if you know about firearms and bullets. A 223, they said it was an AR-15. So typically AR-15 would shoot 223, although I have ARs chambered and all kinds of things. But the typical bullet's 223, fires a 55 grain bullet. So that's pretty small. So 55 grains is like 3.5 grams. Comparatively to other bullets, and Trey, I'm sure you know this, I mean, that's a small bullet. But what makes it powerful is it's a small bullet with a lot of powder behind it. So when that thing comes out of the barrel, it's traveling about 3,100 feet per second. And of course, kinetic energy is mass and velocity, with the bigger weight being velocity. So it puts out 1,700 joules of energy. Okay. Now I know that a lot of people are like, okay, 1,700 joules, that means nothing to me. Well, for example, like 9mm, which is what most police carry and most people that conceal carry use. 9mm puts out like 500 to 700 joules, depending on the particular load and the grain of the bullet. So, this is like up to 3 times more kinetic energy from these like long rifle bullets. And so, it's not unreasonable to say, okay, well, if this hit him, why didn't it just tear him apart? And the reason for that is, when a bullet hits an object, it's not just that the bullet punches a hole through it and like anything where that bullet path was gets injured.
Yeah.
The kinetic energy from a bullet disperses through the tissue, and you get this kinetic blast followed by a cavitation effect. And I think I have a video of that, Travis, if you want to roll it. So this is a gelatin, and so you see that bullet go through the gelatin, and it shows that initial kinetic energy burst as it disperses that energy through the gelatin. And if that kept rolling, you would then see this cavitation effect where it suddenly sucked back in. And so that kinetic energy, when it hits a solid object, does tremendous damage, and that's why these type of rounds are used by the military and hunters to do maximum damage. So it's not unreasonable to think, okay, well, if it got in the ear, why didn't it just blow it off? Well, the ear is a pretty soft structure, and so it's like when you're
really
shooting.
Thin.
Yeah, it's really thin, right? And so, Trey, I'm sure you can attest to this. Like when you go out to the range and you shoot a paper target with a high-power rifle, the paper doesn't explode. What happens?
Right.
It just punches right through it.
You just rip a hole through it.
It just goes right through it. Versus if you shoot like a watermelon with like a high-power rifle, that kinetic energy is allowed to transmit through it, and you see these videos online of someone shooting a watermelon and the thing just explodes.
Right.
And so I think it's reasonable to say, okay, well, the reason his whole ear didn't blow off is, he's just extremely lucky. I mean, and we'll talk about this in the next question that we're going to ask. If that bullet had been over even like an inch, it's a totally different ballgame.
Yeah.
If that thing had been where it hit, to me, like bone, when you think about your ear and how close it is to your skull, you're talking like less than an inch. If that bullet hits the skull, it's different, because then all of that kinetic energy can transmit to that bone, and you would see that bone just shatter, which would then cause lots of bleeding. You'd get bone fragments and maybe potentially bullet fragments in your brain. Suddenly it goes from something that's in almost, inconsequential injury to a potentially fatal injury.
Yeah.
And that comes to the next, not segment, but the next question here is, how close was Trump to actually getting killed? And
Pretty
my
close.
wife and I were talking about this when she got home after she came back from when she left, and he was like a hair's breadth from dying.
Yeah.
And not
Literally
only,
just like turning his head.
Yeah, and so that's great, Sarah. You probably saw the same video that I'm about
Yeah.
to play. I want to show this video of just how, I don't know if you want to call it, divine intervention or just the sheer luck of the universe, but he did turn his head at the very last second. Charles, run that video. And it's going to sound weird when it goes to him turning because it's slowed down. So there is some...
Take a look what happened.
So like it shows, where his head is. Oh, they can't hear me. Okay, sorry. So yeah, it shows, where his head was, and then at the last second he turned it. And, the fact that he turned his head saved his life.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy, like just how lucky he was. And then even though he turned his head, if that bullet had been just, a half an inch over and it got into his skull and all that kinetic energy had been allowed to transmit, I mean, it's a different outcome for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy, scary
That's
stuff.
intense. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a lot of the questions that were being thrown out there. And then the question that most of the media people were asking me about is like, how would you fix the injury that he had? Like, if you have a piece of your ear missing, what are you going to do to fix it? And like I said, I've done lots of ear injuries. I'd say the most common one I see are car wrecks.
Okay.
Because when you get into a car wreck and suddenly your head gets like slammed around because the car is spinning or whatever, you have glass right beside you. And if you hit it hard enough, the glass shatters and then you get cuts on your ear. I've seen that super commonly. I've seen knife and even machete type injuries to the ear. I know probably sometime in my lifetime I've treated a gunshot to the ear. I just don't remember it offhand. So I've actually treated a lot of these, and what makes the ear difficult to work on, it's kind of a complex structure, right? It's very thin skin, which it's hard to work on tissues that are thin. It's a fixed structure underneath, so it's hard to just close skin over that cartilage. Like
Right.
if you get an injury on your arm because there's like some fat tissue there, you can literally pull that skin together quite easily and close a big hole.
Yeah. There's not much there. On
Yeah,
your
there's
ear.
not. It's a lot of avascular cartilage and then supravascular skin over the top. And the cartilage itself makes it difficult because if you're missing cartilage, it's not as simple as, okay, I'm going to take this hole, make it into a wedge and do like that, because the cartilage doesn't want to move very easily. And if you try to do that, what happens is the ear will cup and it'll end up being like this.
Oh, yeah.
Because the cartilage is being bent inward. And so if you have an injury to the ear, especially with cartilage, or even if it's just skin and you have to remove some cartilage, it gets very complex very quick. And it's also very three-dimensional. It's not a planar structure, it's a three-dimensional structure. And so that's why I get called to do these things. And I have a couple of pictures that I wanted to show of how you might deal with this. So this is actually, it's a picture of how you would treat a skin cancer. But if you imagine that little that bump on the upper outer part of that ear was a hole, then the whole thing would be the same, right?
Yeah.
So this is basically a cartilage and skin advancement. And what they did here is they took out the mass, and of course now we're saying, okay, well in this instance it's a bullet hole. But then they took out some of the cartilage in like that little moon shape on that second picture on the left.
Okay.
And because they took out that piece in the middle, it allows what's left behind to come together in a manner almost like a puzzle piece to fit the cartilage back together, to fit the skin back together, and keep that shape of the ear that you would normally recognize. And when you do something like that, a lot of times the circumference of the ear will definitely be shorter, right? Because you're taking a chunk out and you're kind of condensing it. But because it's so hard to see both ears at the same time on a person, people never notice. If you took a picture of each side and you put them together, you'd be like, oh yeah, you got one ear that's smaller than the other. But like in everyday talking, you'd never see it. And I know that because actually my mom, who when I was on the shows this week, she's like, why didn't you mention that you did my ear? So my mom had a skin cancer on her ear, and I actually take a big chunk off. And I didn't do this method. I actually did the next one. So show that next picture. Yeah. So this is called the star pattern. And so it's very similar. Basically what you're doing is you're removing cartilage. You can see it there in the middle picture. You're removing cartilage in a way that when you close it all together, it doesn't cup the ear. Like it doesn't change the structure, the shape of it. I like this method, but the other method's okay. The reason I like this one is it's a little less invasive. You're not making quite as many cuts. I kind of prefer this one, but generally when I'm repairing ear injuries, it's just like, what do you got left?
Right.
It's like, do you got a lot to work?
A machete to an ear. That doesn't sound, a machete to the ear doesn't sound like you'd get very much left of your ear.
Yeah, man, I remember that
like
one
it just,
particular
like,
one I
cut
did when I was in
clean
training. Somebody got attacked with a machete, and it was the ear, the face, the neck. It was just, ended up sewing for like 2.5 hours. It was
Yuck.
it was tedious, and I actually like sewing, but after that one, I was like, okay, I'm done for the day. But yeah, so to repair that, based on what his injury looks like, I would repair that in surgery. And it does bring up the question of, has he had this thing fixed yet? I don't know, like they didn't mention that he went to surgery. I wouldn't personally try to do something like that in the ER with the cartilage. I always do these in surgery. And maybe why he has a bandage on it, you know, because he still has that bandage. When I repair an ear and I close it all up with stitches, I don't bandage it.
Right.
You know, and I wondered, you know, when he was going to make his next appearance.
Rally thing.
Yeah, if he would have like something over it.
People were dressing up like him.
I know, that was so funny.
Little ear pillows on them.
Yeah, you wonder if maybe they just are doing some dressings to it and then they plan to repair it at another time.
Yeah.
I wouldn't wait too long. I mean, the longer you wait with cartilage exposed, the more risk that he could get like an infection.
Right.
So I don't know if they repaired it and then for whatever reason they just want to cover it because maybe the ear looks rough, because it certainly would look rough after you had to do reconstruction on it. Or maybe they haven't repaired it yet, because I hadn't heard that he went to surgery, and I personally would do that in surgery.
Yeah.
So there are definitely some questions that are out there as to...
I bet it's being planned because he just had that.
Right,
rally.
he had the convention and stuff, right?
Yeah, that
so
convention. So I'm sure
Yeah.
I'm sure it has to be scheduled around all of that stuff.
I mean, if it were me and like I was the person on call when he came into the hospital, I'd be like, let's just go to the OR and fix it right now. Because I mean, I could fix that whole thing in probably an hour or less, depending on how complex it was. And then it would all be sewed up, and you know, it would look beat up for sure. I mean, the skin would probably be bruised. And
I bet he has his own like fancy doctors.
Yeah, I don't know. And maybe that's true that he was in that small
Like
town.
plastic
and
surgery.
They probably didn't have a plastic surgeon. Well, I don't know. He probably got shipped to like a bigger hospital. I don't think that he went to a trauma center, because I saw the hospital where they took him and it wasn't very big. They very well may have just like temporized it and he's going to get it fixed later.
I would think so, because he probably has his own plastic surgeon.
Yeah, he probably does. I'd do it for free, Trump. If you want me to do it, I'll do a good job and I'll do it free. I would love to be the guy to fix someone's famous person's ear. That'd be cool.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
Would you do the star method?
It would just depend on what I had to
Yeah.
work with. A lot of times when ears get injured, like it'll have cuts and stuff on it, and you'll be like, oh, it already kind of halfway did this one method, so I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
I like the star. I've done it many times, and it works well.
The route of least resistance.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in reconstruction, as you do the simplest thing possible to get the job done.
Yeah.
You know, so I definitely don't make things complex just for the sake of it. You know, if I can get the same result with something simple, I'm always going to go with that.
That's a good way.
Yeah, but yeah, it was pretty interesting. There's still, I think, questions out there that are not answered yet about his injury. Well, there's lots of questions about the whole thing. Like, of course, the conspiracy theorists are out.
Oh my gosh!
Like, it's just
so
like
many.
Overwhelming. Like all these crazy conspiracy theories about this, but I try not to get involved in that. I'm just more interested in, you know, the stuff I know about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
But
good
wild
to stick
stuff.
with that.
I'm really interested to see. We'll definitely do a follow-up on this when Trump's ear is finally revealed.
And see if you can guess like
Yeah,
what
see what
they
they did. Yeah, because eventually he's gonna, you know, not have that bandage on, and you know,
gonna
he
have
gets
his ear
photographed so
pillow.
much that we'll be able to get a high-resolution pic
Yeah.
and kind of maybe dive into what happened.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Well, you know, regardless of political affiliation, I mean, I'm glad he's okay. I mean, I think that he was very
Very
just
lucky.
insanely lucky. If he was a cat, he used all 9 of his lives right there.
Yeah.
You know,
That was
'cause
crazy.
That definitely could have gone a different way, and that would have been just problematic. Yeah. All right.
Scary
Well,
stuff.
let me know what you guys think. If you have any comments about Trump's ear injury, any questions, I'd be happy to do a follow-up on this. But yeah, you know, like I said, best wishes to him. Hope he heals up quick, and hopefully we won't have any of that crazy stuff again.
Yeah. What a downer.
I know, right? I was like really kind of like in shock. I was like, God, I can't believe that.
People are still doing that?
I know, right? Haven't we got
You
past
know?
that?
Yeah. Let's move on.
I guess not. All right, let's move on to the next segment. Not to like keep talking about Republicans, but this one, I kept seeing this thing pop up in my social media about somebody at the RNC convention that it looked like they had bad plastic surgery, or they said they looked like the Joker, and I was like, what is this all about? So did you guys hear about this guy, Matt Gatez?
No.
No? I kept seeing it pop up, and probably because I follow some plastic surgery stuff, so when something, you know, is out there, it tends to like trickle into my feed.
Yeah.
So I don't know who Matt Gatez is. Apparently he's a Florida congressman.
Florida.
Yeah, Florida, right? He's probably going to one of those places.
Gosh.
So anyway, so this is about Matt Gatez and his Botox problems. Yeah, there he is.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I know, right? So when I heard about this, I had to pull up the pictures, and immediately when I saw the picture on the right, I was like, "Oop, yep, that's a problem." So throw up that next one, Charles. I think I got a little bit closer picture without the words on it. Yeah. So I guess that's his normal self there on the left, and on the right, that was him at the convention. I guess he was speaking. I don't know if he was speaking or if he was just doing an interview or what. So
He already has very pointed eyebrows. Anyways.
Yeah. So when I looked at this,
didn't need to have that much.
I know he does kind of look like the Joker, though, doesn't he? Yeah. So you guys probably know as well as I do what this is, or maybe don't. I mean, to me, it looks like that he's had Botox, and they gave him a pattern that I would typically use for a woman. Most women like the arched eyebrow look, and looking at you, Sarah, which I couldn't remember if you had arched eyebrows. Your eyebrows are not that arched.
No, yeah, mine are super straight.
Yeah, a lot of women will manicure their eyebrows to have that arch, and so when I meet someone for the first time that's going to have Botox, a woman specifically, I say, hey, look, the way I normally do this Botox pattern could arch your eyebrows. Is that something you would not like, or are you concerned about that? And most women say, no, I'm not concerned about that, because they actually like the arched eyebrow look. The only exception being people who already have really arched eyebrows,
It'll make it look too wild.
If they manicure them really aggressively, then the Botox can
make you look like the Joker.
Yeah, you look like the Joker, right? I've had one or two people over the many years that came back and said, yeah, it's a little bit too much. And so for most women, though, a little bit of arch is okay. And I think if he was a woman, people would probably not be talking about this, but it looks really odd on a man.
It
and
does
so
look weird.
It brings up the question of, okay, well, what happened to this guy? Well, I don't think that they really thought this through. There's a lot of people out there doing Botox, and maybe they're don't necessarily think about things. Plus, not as many men come for Botox, so that means they're probably less experienced with it. Like when I do men personally, I give them two options. I say, look, I'm going to break up the lines in the forehead right in the center, but I'm not going to go out too far, because that will affect the eyebrows arching. Or the other alternative is to do a really aggressive approach, which would give you a more frozen look with less movement, but it would drop that outside part of your eyebrow. And I would say of the people, and I do Botox still. We try to have our med spa people do it, but there are people out there that say, oh, I want to go to the doctor, or people like you and my friends who want it. I'll still do yours. But I do have some patients that actually prefer not to have the arch eyebrow look at all. And so for them, especially if they're women, I'll pull that Botox all the way out here to the sides.
Yeah.
And they have a little bit less expression, but it's not a frozen look.
Okay.
But their eyebrows don't arch.
Okay.
And so I just think that he got kind of in that middle ground where, enough Botox was given that it affects the eyebrows more towards the center and not on the outside, and then you end up with this.
Yeah, the top of his eyebrows are very pointed.
Yeah, they're naturally pointed, and so when this happened to him, to me it does look unusual. I mean, you could fix that immediately.
It made his eyes look really small. Didn't it?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Throw that picture back up.
Look how small his eyes look.
It almost looks like an AI picture, to be honest. I swear that's the real picture. I pulled it off one of the big websites.
Poor guy. He was just trying to look good for the
It
convention.
might be a Megan Fox phenomenon where the lighting or his makeup just they're just not flattering.
Yeah, he
I
was
don't
just
know.
trying to look good.
He's probably a super nice guy. I feel bad picking on him. I'm not picking on him.
And he was trying to open his eyes like this.
Yeah, right. But he probably can't open his eyes very well because
because of the Botox.
Me being kind of familiar with him, he's not a super nice guy.
Oh, he's not?
No.
Oh, how do you know him, Charles?
I keep up kind of politically a little bit.
Oh, okay.
He's he's on the seat in Congress.
Yeah, I know he was a congressman, but there's so many of them. I only know the ones that hit the news. I know mostly I know the ones that are really talked about the worst. There's the two Republican girls that everyone makes fun of, and then there's the AOC girl.
Of course. His
So-
eyebrows look diabolical.
He does, man. He looks like a
He looks like he's
supervillain.
He
scheming.
does.
A
He
supervillain.
definitely
Scheming
does.
for something.
Well, anyway, like I said, I'm not picking on Matt Gatez. I don't know anything about
Not
him.
at
So,
all. Not at all.
But I wanted to kind of do just a little bit of a dive in here, and we've danced around this segment before on various things. But like, what can go wrong if you get Botox? You know, and you know, it's something that, you know, Sarah, we probably talked about this, you and
Yeah.
I, at times when you've come in, because I do kind of go through this with my patients. So I guess the first thing would be is you don't like the look of what the Botox does. And I got another pic. Throw that next pic up there. And this is kind of the same thing where this girl had some arched eyebrows, and then they did a particular pattern and didn't release or didn't relax the muscles way out to the lateral part. And then, you know, you get this super arch.
Yeah.
And, you know, this person was not necessarily happy with that. So that's an easily fixable problem. And, you know, if I do a person and their eyebrows get too arched, I just bring them back and I put like an extra dot out to the side and you can solve it. But this is a potential issue with Botox, is they do the pattern and it leaves you with a facial expression you don't like.
Yeah.
That's an easily fixable thing. A lot of it can be avoided by talking to the patient ahead of time. And so if you're thinking about going and getting Botox for the first time, or maybe you've gotten and you weren't happy with like how the shape of your eyebrows were or something else, talk to your injector and say, look, you know, I'm worried about this. Can you tell me about it? And if they say, yeah, I can tell you about it, then you feel confident that you're okay. But if they're like, well, what are you talking about? Then you might want to like find somewhere else.
Yeah.
Another thing with Botox is it may not work.
Okay.
You know, Botox is very kind of persnickety. It has to be kept at a certain temperature once you reconstitute it, because it comes in like, it's almost like the individual Botox molecules are like just in this vial that looks empty. It's almost like dust, and you reconstitute it with saline. And once you do that, it has like a kind of a limited lifespan. If it gets too hot, it won't work. And sometimes I've actually even got a Botox vial that was bad. You know, just I mixed it myself and I injected it in someone, and they came back in a week. They're like, yeah, there's nothing happening. So one of the things with Botox is it may not work. Most of the time that's due to like a storage issue.
Okay.
You know, so if you go to a place and
It doesn't have to do with like a person. Like it. Like do some people?
I mean,
just
it
not
could
work
if
on
they
people?
potentially drew it up wrong, like they miscalculated the dose, then you might get like a really weak effect. There is a little bit of intelligence needed to properly constitute the stuff and store it and inject it. I mean, it's not idiot proof.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, I mean, it is a procedure.
I wouldn't want to be responsible for putting that in somebody's face.
Yeah, fortunately,
Big
it's,
responsibility.
yeah, it's mostly it's not really medical risk so much. It's more
Just
patient-
like if
being-
you like it,
yeah, being
customer
unhappy.
service
Yeah.
part of it.
Another risk is if you get an asymmetrical result. I got a picture of that, Charles. Throw that up. It's mostly an eyebrow. See, it's that person's eyebrow on the right still has, or her right, our left, still has some lift to it, but the eyebrow on her left, our right, has been basically let down, and so she's got asymmetry. You can fix that, but the only way to fix it is to,
Inject on the other side.
yeah, you got to let the other side down too. Yeah, that's an injection issue. If you inject it properly, and you inject it in equal amounts, you shouldn't get something like that. I can't say I've never, in my however many 17 or 18 years of doing this, had an asymmetry. I have. I've had one or two over the years. That's easily fixable. If it happens to you a lot, then you might question your the person doing it to you. The next one would be Botox migration. I know we've talked about this. So Botox migration is where you inject the Botox in one spot, and the effect of it travels further away than you wanted.
Okay.
And so the big one is when the Botox gets into the eyelid and you get an eyelid droop.
Ew.
Yeah, I got a picture of that because that really is very, very noticeable. So
Oh dear.
yep. So on the picture on the right
Her
of the
eyes
screen,
are huge.
yeah. So she's in the picture on the right. She's trying to open her eyes as wide as she can.
Okay.
And you see the one eye on her left, our right, is really, really open, but the right one looks like she's sleepy.
Yes.
That's classic eyelid ptosis, or basically paralysis. Fortunately, it's not necessarily harmful. It just is super annoying, and you look like you've had a stroke for 3 to 6 months, depending on how much Botox.
That
got
you
there.
can't really fix that one very easy.
No, not really. No.
Oh, gosh.
This typically is an injection issue. When I do Botox, and one thing I've been told by people who go to different places is that when I inject Botox, I do more sticks, which I guess on one hand is downer because you don't want to get stuck with a needle more times than you have to.
Yeah.
But the advantage of doing more sticks is you're putting smaller doses in more locations versus putting one large dose in, which then has that ability to maybe get away
Spread
from you.
out, yeah.
Yeah. So I like to use smaller doses in a little bit more stick pattern. There are pros and cons to it, but I do think that the results you get from it are probably the best.
I'd rather have more sticks than a droopy face.
A droopy face. Yeah. It also tends to make it very smooth, if you do that versus, it's precision, right? Precision is all about like small actions, not some big action. In very rare cases, there have been reports that people have a difficulty with their vision or swallowing, or even breathing if the Botox really gets away from you. I've looked it up, and I haven't found anything really serious about that. Like you hear about this, but it's like you hear about it, but you're not really sure if it happens because I can't find like an individual person that it's happened to.
Yeah.
Remember we had that fake Botox story though. Remember the fake Botox was getting away from people, and somebody actually had to put on a breathing machine. The last thing I'd say is, anytime you're getting stuck with a needle, bleeding, bruising, swelling, I tell people honestly that at least in my patient population, the biggest risk of getting Botox is you get a bruise. And that's not related to the Botox, that's related to getting stuck with a needle.
Yeah.
So, did you bruise when I did yours?
I got one a little bit right here whenever you put it right here.
Yeah. It can happen.
It wasn't really that noticeable.
And plus girls can put makeup over it, so that makes it nice. Yeah, the thing about that is obviously when any good injector is injecting Botox, they're not going to put the needle through any blood vessel that they can see, but the problem is the ones you can't see.
Yeah.
There's plenty of small blood vessels in the skin, especially and some in the subcutaneous fat tissue or even the muscle that you're not going to be able to see, and it's just kind of a luck, right? If you hit one and it bleeds enough, you're going to get a bruise.
Yeah, it wasn't very big.
Yeah, but they tend to go away. So, but yeah, that was interesting. Matt Gatez. Hey, honestly, cheers to him for getting out there and getting Botox. I think it's cool. I haven't done it yet. My office manager keeps hounding me to get Botox.
You should do it.
I may do it just once and just see. Honestly, I'm pretty just lucky genetically. I don't have that many natural wrinkles, but I've noticed that I'm starting to see a couple. So I may try it. Honestly, may try it just more for the entertainment value and to see if I like it. Not because I'm like, oh, I need to go get it. I like to do the lasers and stuff. That's my thing.
Yeah.
That stuff works really, really good. You'll have to try one of those sometime.
Okay.
Yeah, we can
I'm
do
interested.
We could actually do it, and we could do one and like video it if you want.
Okay.
We don't have to. I don't want to put you on the spot.
I don't care.
It'd be like free laser.
I'm used to videos.
Yeah.
Cameras in my face.
Botox issues. Yeah, if you have any questions about Botox, bad effects, if you ever had a bad experience with it and you want to talk about it, that'd be interesting. I'd love to dive into that. So reach out to us if you have any comments on that. So, all right, last segment. It's summer.
Heat strokes.
Yeah. I had a heat exhaustion once in my life.
Really?
Yeah, when I was a kid. I was in summer and I was bicycling, and it was just middle of summer, and you don't, when you're a kid you're dumb, you don't think about, oh, it may be too hot to like be doing what I'm doing, and I started like really kind of going down, like getting dizzy and just like pouring sweat, just felt bad, headache. I didn't have heat stroke, like that's different as we'll talk about, but the topic that we're going to go over is heat exhaustion and heat stroke. I actually wrote an article for one of the local papers about this last week or the week before, the Katy Trail Weekly. Do you guys ever read that Katy Trail Weekly? Probably not.
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah. I read a regular column in there. I've done it for like 2 years now.
That's cool.
Maybe I'm coming up on my 100th article. Actually, I write it every other week. But anyway, so August is almost here. I don't know about you guys. I love Texas, but I don't like August here.
Yeah.
It is like
hot.
unbearably hot.
This is my birthday month.
When's your birthday?
August 20th.
20th.
So is Avery's birthday is August 11th.
My wife's the 29th. Yeah. How old are you gonna be? Will you say how old are you gonna be?
35.
35.
Yeah.
You can run for like Senate or something, right? Or is it president? I can't remember.
Okay. You heard it here first.
We could use some new candidates. Sarah announces her presidential candidacy live on Top. Okay. Well, happy early birthday.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you guys have heard that there have been some record heat waves already this summer. It was in the news a couple weeks ago.
Man.
Yeah, which is why I was talking about this. And we actually got spared here in Texas. It was mostly out in California, Arizona, New Mexico. Like they got hit with some insanely high temperatures. And there actually have been dozens of deaths from the heat already this year in the United States. Which is pretty crazy because, we're just kind of we're in the thick of summer now, but when that was going on, it was still pretty early summer. So, I want to talk about heat exhaustion and heat stroke because these can happen. And they can definitely creep up on you. And understanding the symptoms is the biggest key to preventing it from getting on to heat stroke, which actually is a medical emergency and absolutely can kill you. So I want to talk about heat exhaustion first because this is far more common and it is less serious.
I bet I've had it.
Have you had it?
I'm sure I have. I work out in a AC-less gym in the summer.
You may have. Yeah, well, you got to be careful, because heat exhaustion, you can go straight to heat stroke in rare instances, but generally heat stroke, which is a medical emergency, is not followed, but preceded by. I was having a senior moment. I couldn't remember the word precede. You guys feel free to help me out here if I lose my way. Preceded by heat exhaustion. And it's described as when the body overheats and it can't effectively cool itself. And our body has a lot of different ways that it cools us down. Sweating being the number one.
Yeah.
Right? When you sweat, the sweat evaporates off your skin and it cools you actually very, very effectively. Mm-hmm. So first thing I want to do is talk about the risks of heat exhaustion, which obviously the first one is going to be it's hot outside, extreme heat.
Yeah.
Yeah, extreme heat is going to be your biggest risk. This one is kind of interesting, and I didn't actually think about this, which I feel kind of dumb. High humidity.
Oh, yeah.
Because if it's humid outside...
It's hard to breathe when it's humid.
Right, and what it does is when it's really humid, it's harder for sweat to evaporate.
Yeah.
And the evaporation of sweat is what cools you down. So if you're in a high humid area, which Dallas is kind of middle of the road, it's slightly humid here, but not like Houston, which I don't know anyone would live in Houston, no offense to Houstonites, but... The humidity there is brutal.
No bueno. I hate it.
Have you been down to Houston in the summer?
Yeah, two of my sisters live there.
Yeah?
It's the worst.
Trey, Houston?
You said what you said, and I co-signed it.
That's very diplomatic of you, Trey.
And I co-signed it.
Diplomatic. High humidity.
You endorsed it.
Yeah. It's not an endorsement. It's just a co-sign. So high humidity actually increases your risk because it's harder for you to sweat. Mm-hmm. So the other thing, and talk about sweating, if you're dehydrated. Mm-hmm. If you're dehydrated, it's harder for you to sweat. Your body's going to heat up faster. Intense physical activity, that's what got me. I was like racing around on my bicycle somewhere. And intense physical activity, which causes a lot of metabolism in your muscles, generates heat. Direct sunlight makes it worse than if you're not. Age extremes, infants or very young children and elderly cannot regulate their body temperature as well.
Yeah.
So those people are more at risk. This is kind of one I wasn't really say that I knew, is if you're accustomed to heat or not. Yeah. Like people who live in the heat have their bodies are more effective at cooling than people who are not accustomed to it.
Definitely.
Which is interesting, because I know with altitude, obviously you get acclimated to it. I didn't know how your body, I may look this up just out of my own curiosity. How does your body change so that you cool?
Like how does it accommodate?
Like metabolically or histologically, how does your body change? Because for altitude, what happens is you get more red blood cells, right? And that allows you to carry more oxygen when there's not as high oxygen content. I don't know how your body changes to allow more effective cooling. If you guys know this, I'd be super impressed because I have no clue. Any idea? No, don't feel bad.
I'm not sure.
It's interesting. I always find when I find something new, I'm like, oh wow, I didn't know that. How does it work?
It dehydrates the rest of your body. You have to drink more water.
maybe
Like
you hold hydration better. I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, like causes your body to retain more water.
Exactly. It may be something where you have less diuretic effect, like what is it, ADH, anti-diuretic hormone. You know, that changes so that you hold fluid. That very well may be it. Alcohol consumption, which dehydrates you and also affects your body to cool. And then finally, wearing non-breathable clothing.
Yeah.
Which is one that a lot of people don't think about. And one of the people that died, you know, kind of close to me, was a motorcyclist, was wearing, you know, the full
leather.
gear and was in Death Valley and just basically overheated on the bike.
Oh my goodness.
So symptoms of heat exhaustion. We're still talking about heat exhaustion here. We're not in a stroke. Heat exhaustion, heavy sweating, weakness, fatigue, dizziness. That's what got me. You can have fainting, cold, pale, clammy skin. Normally when you're hot, like your skin is hot. It should be hot and wet, right? Because you're sweating. It should be warm and sweating. When you get heat exhaustion, it starts to get clammy, it starts to get cool. Muscle cramps, fast but weak pulse. Probably you're losing cardiac output. Vision changes, nausea, vomiting, and headache. So that's heat exhaustion. So if you're out in the heat, and I know I've had this more than once. I remember when I was playing sports, sometimes like it'd be really hot and like my vision would start to
for sure.
you know, fade a little bit.
Or if you like sit down to like breathe and you stand back up.
Yeah. So if
That
you
happened
start
to me yesterday.
Yeah. If you start to get those symptoms, you need to be careful because you are starting to overtax your body's ability to keep you cool. And you want to treat that to prevent it from going on to heat stroke. So obviously number one factor or number one thing to do if you feel like you get heat exhaustion is get out of the heat.
Yes.
Even getting to shade makes a big difference. Obviously the best would be get into some air conditioning.
Yeah.
Other things, drink water and make sure you're hydrated. Drink water or sports drink. Loosen any restrictive or excessive clothing. And then one of the best things you can do to cool yourself down is to get a cool wet cloth and put on you or use a cool bath.
The one thing I do whenever I get super overheated
at
my gym is I take off my shoes and my socks. I don't know why, but it always makes me feel so much like
I
cooled
agree
off.
with that. Like I know when I go running and like I get done, it's like my feet are just like on fire.
Yeah. Dude, I think you release a lot of heat from your feet.
I think I read somewhere, and this may be like an urban myth or it may be true, that a lot of heat is released through your head.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
That's why you wear like little hats, like
when
beanies.
It's cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it's cold, yeah. Okay, if you do not treat your heat exhaustion, you could go on to heat stroke. This is a severe medical emergency that requires immediate medical attention because it can quickly cause both brain and vital organ damage.
Yeah.
And there is a strict definition for heat stroke, unlike heat exhaustion, which doesn't have a strict definition. Heat stroke is when the body's core temperature gets above 104 degrees Fahrenheit. And for all our friends watching that might be from Europe or Canada, that would be 40 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
It has potential for very severe symptoms, and they are slightly different than heat exhaustion, so it's important to know the difference. Skin becomes hot but dry. Your body's ability to sweat has
Just goes
ceased,
Yeah.
and you stop sweating, and then you're really in danger because you're going to continue to gain that heat. Your pulse becomes very rapid and strong as your cardiac output starts to drop. You have confusion, unconsciousness, hallucinations, slurred speech, and then moves on to seizure and coma, which obviously are not things that you want to have.
No.
So, recognize the symptoms of heat stroke, very important, because in addition to all those things that you would normally do, which is get to a cooler place and potentially put in a cool bath or cool cloths, because a person in heat stroke will not necessarily be able to do that themselves.
Yeah.
Like they're going to need someone to help them or they're going to die. Before you do all that, the very first thing you'd want to do obviously is
Call 911.
Call 911. Yeah, absolutely. Call 911, get EMS involved. Other things to remember, if you got somebody that's in heat stroke and they're unconscious, you do not want to try to give them like fluids by mouth.
Right.
Because they can absolutely aspirate. Then you're dealing with a whole nother set of problems.
CPR.
The other thing to remember with heat stroke, which is it's a very smart thing and something that I didn't necessarily think of off the top of my head, you don't want to try to give those people anti-fever medications like acetaminophen, Tylenol, aspirin, because they can potentially cause more damage because the body's in a weakened state, and they can actually cause way more damage than they can potentially bring down the fever, which is not going to happen.
It's interesting. I wonder how big the gap is from like heat exhaustion to heat stroke. Like, where's that?
Yeah, It's
Where
a
have you
great
gone
question
too far?
because to say that you'd probably have to know like, is there like a concrete definition of heat exhaustion? Well,
And there's not.
Not really. I mean, with heat stroke, it's like, okay, body temperature 104. It's not like heat exhaustion is 101. I mean, at least there's no criteria out there that is established. You know, I think for heat exhaustion, it's like when you start to get those symptoms and you start to feel
That's
off,
like your sign that you just need to chill out.
you need to chill out. If you start getting dizzy, headaches, you know, you start to feel unwell and it's hot, you need to change your situation.
Yeah.
And you need to start cooling off because people die of heat stroke.
Yeah,
Like,
so it's the people that ignore those signs that's
once again why
goes in,
education is important. You know, you hear something like this and you just keep it in the back of your mind. It's like, oh, okay, when these things start to hit, like my body's actually a little bit in trouble. I need to take care of myself.
Yeah, luckily whenever I stood up too fast, it was at the end of a workout, so I was already done.
Some of that could have been for you. It could have been a vasovagal effect.
Yeah.
I mean, it probably is multifactorial, what's heat and that, but you know, when you are really straining yourself and you stand up too quick, you can get like a vasovagal where like your blood vessels dilate and you just get like a little drop in your blood pressure.
Yeah, I did that yesterday, and I was like, I'm gonna sit back down.
I know for a fact that when I played sports, I had a couple times where it was like super hot out, and like I started to get that little kind of cone vision, and I'm like,
For
whoa,
sure.
because you know, like once again, I was stupid as a kid and probably didn't think, oh, I need to hydrate myself.
Yeah, I'm
It's
gonna
like,
live forever.
yeah, I know. It's amazing I made it past my teenage years. So, all right, I think that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this 100th episode of our show. We really do appreciate it. We are going to keep putting out content, and please let us know if you have any topics that you'd like us to talk about on the next episode of Nip Talk.
Bye.
Bye.